Hello. Today, Gleb Vladimirovich Nosovsky will talk about an important scientific discovery made in collaboration with Anatoliy Timofeyevich Fomenko during the study of written sources and the reconstruction of authentic facts of ancient and medieval history. Gleb Vladimirovich, good evening.
Good evening.
Gleb Vladimirovich, back in the 1990s, you and Anatoly Fomenko put forward and substantiated the hypothesis that the Evangelical Jerusalem was not located in modern Israel but on the Bosphorus. Then, you conducted an expedition to Turkey and found undeniable evidence for this hypothesis. Please tell us how it happened.
That's absolutely correct. Back in the 1990s, we came to the conclusion that the Evangelical Jerusalem was located on the Bosporus, and initially, we thought it was Constantinople. After some time, we discovered the tomb of Yusha, the place where Christ was crucified, and the evangelical Mount Golgotha or Calvary Hill, which is now called Mount Bakaz. We did this, as far as I remember, in 1995, after reading a book by Jalal Isat about Constantinople, which mentioned a mysterious mountain near Istanbul, Constantinople, on which either the bed of Hercules or the tomb of King Amycos or some other ancient sanctuary was located, or the tomb of Joshua. This mysterious mountain with its ancient enigmatic tomb was located near Constantinople, and we decided to investigate what kind of tomb it was. And so, as far as I remember, in 1995, we went there and had some difficulties finding this tomb because Turks don't understand when you say, "Tomb of Jesus." They call it the tomb of Yusha. It took us a while to explain to them what we were looking for, but eventually, we found this symbolic tomb, which was 17 meters long. When we reached this mountain, the symbolic tomb of Yusha, we discovered that it was a very famous sanctuary among the residents of Istanbul. Believers from Istanbul constantly come there, have weddings, and pray regularly. It's a fenced area. There is an entrance to the enclosure, and inside is the symbolic tomb. People stand around it. The tomb itself is a rectangular plot of land approximately 17 meters long and 3 to 4 meters wide. The grill is covered with a chain link fence so that people cannot reach in and take a piece of the land. At that time, it was like this. People were walking around, praying, and it was evident that this place was highly admired. It is still called the Tomb of Jesus, or in Turkish, the Tomb of Saint Yusha. This is the symbolic tomb of Jesus. Again, and I emphasize this, it is a symbolic tomb. There is no actual burial there, it is a symbolic monument. I am now showing you a high-angle shot where we raised the camera above the grill. This monument perfectly corresponds to the place of Christ's crucifixion. On the edges, 2 points are marked, in the form of 2 millstones. One is a millstone with a hole. A millstone is a figurative name. It is a column with a hole. A pole is attached to it. It is located on one side, and on the other side, there is a similar column but shorter, not protruding much from the ground. It is cracked and also has a hole in the middle, symbolizing another point. There are 2 points. As we assume, one millstone symbolizes the place of crucifixion. Presumably, the hole in the stone symbolizes the cross that was inserted there. And the second millstone symbolizes, as we understand it, the place where Christ was taken down from the cross and mourned. This is the entrance to the sanctuary. It is a large sanctuary. I repeat once again, that many people from Istanbul still go there to pray. After carefully studying various testimonies about how the Lord's tomb looked and the place where Christ was crucified according to ancient accounts, we came to the conclusion that this is indeed Golgotha. This highest mountain on the Bosporus is the very same Golgotha where Christ was crucified. The tomb of Jesus represents both the place of crucifixion and the place where he was taken down from the cross. However, having discovered that the Evangelical Jerusalem was located in Constantinople, we encountered a contradiction that we couldn't resolve for a long time between what we saw and what is written in the Gospels. Because the distance from Istanbul, that is, Constantinople, to Mount Beykoz, that is, Mount Golgotha, is over 30 kilometers. Moreover, one has to cross the Bosporus, and there were no bridges at that time. That means, one has to sail and walk for over 30 kilometers. According to the Gospels, the events happened relatively quickly. Jesus was given the cross. He carried it for some time, climbed the mountain, and was crucified there. The accounts in the Gospels describe a fairly short journey. Although the ascent was long and described as a difficult, heavy ascent for Jesus carrying the heavy cross, but it was not a long way to the mountain. There was no crossing of any strait, no major river, and no mention of a boat. And yet, 30 kilometers is a whole day's walk from morning till evening. But according to the Gospels, all this took place within a few hours. This contradiction troubled us. Therefore, we wondered how it actually happened, how to make sense of it. In 2006, we once again went to the Beykoz because one of our readers provided us with information that there was an interesting ancient cemetery there. Although this information did not prove to be true, it was actually very fortunate. While searching for that cemetery, we accidentally found Jerusalem. We went to the Beykoz and started searching. It is the mountaintop, and this is the spring near the tomb of Jesus. This spring is where water flows, but it doesn't come out of the ground there. It comes out from under the ground in this location. People are not allowed there. There's a mesh, but a large hole was made in it, and we found a young Turkish woman who guided us. She was a lively girl. She led us to this spring, showed us the areas around the tomb. She told us that a lot of gold is found there. The locals constantly search for gold and find it, including gold coins. It's all overgrown there, there are ruins. Now you can see in the photo the ruins of some structures. There are some pits. Local people dig in them to find old gold coins, and they occasionally find them. You see, there's some ancient masonry covered in leaves and overgrown with bushes. These are the ruins of some buildings, a city or a settlement around the tomb. We wandered there, and then at the flea market nearby the tomb. I think the same girl showed us old paintings related to the Mount of Jesus. One of the paintings caught our attention, and we either took a photo of it or maybe even bought it. It depicts Turks resting near the tomb of Jesus. They sit there, relaxing, with a view of the Bosporus, its mouth leading to the Black Sea, and they gaze at the impressive castle on the mountain. Jalal Isat also wrote about these ancient ruins, saying that from the Mount of Jesus, one can see some ancient Byzantine ruins. However, we didn't see them. The thing is, in this painting, the view is clear, but now everything is covered with trees. And when you're on Mount of Jesus, on Beykoz, you won't see what is depicted in this painting because of the dense vegetation. Therefore, this painting intrigued us a lot, and we started to think, what is this? Maybe it's just a fantastic depiction. We couldn't understand it but took it or photographed it and continued our journey. Before going there, we pre-ordered a taxi. We arrived from Istanbul by taxi, over the bridge, across the Bosporus. We asked the taxi driver to drive us around the area and find this ancient cemetery that our reader had told us about. But we didn't find any cemetery on the Beykoz itself, although we drove around the tomb. We also drove around the foothills but found nothing. Then the taxi driver told us, "Yes, I know, there's a cemetery nearby, and I'll take you there." We were delighted and went with him. He drove us. When he descended from the mountain, we found ourselves on the shores of the Bosporus. We were amazed by the view. We asked him to stop, got out, and took photos. This is the photo from 2006. We saw the same fortress depicted in that painting. It's visible up there. Here's a close-up photo. We saw it from the Bosporus shore and started thinking how to get to it but continued our way to the cemetery. However, it turned out to be the same place. This taxi driver brought us to the cemetery. The thing is, behind Yeros, behind those towers, across the ravine, if you pass through the trees and bushes, there is indeed a cemetery. And the taxi driver took us to that cemetery. You can't see the cemetery here, it's behind me. And he showed us that cemetery. But despite being on a very high Bosporus shore and being very close to the Yeros towers, we couldn't see them from here because the dense row of bushes blocked the view. By the merest accident, I decided to go behind those bushes and see what was there. It was purely accidental. And as soon as I passed through those bushes, I saw this scene. This is again a photo from 2006. I saw those two huge towers and the inscription. It was right in front of them on a post, and it said, Yeros Kolisi, which means, Fortress Yeros. It astonished me because Yeros is Jerusalem. In Turkish, it is pronounced Yoros. In Russian, of course, we can't say it like that because we always stress the letter yo, while in their language, it is unstressed. That's why I say Yeros. Moreover, the letter yo is absent in Church Slavonic, and it was also absent in the Old Formal Russian language. Not just the letter, but the sound itself. The sound, yo, is absent in the Church language. Now, we say, yo, but in Church Slavonic, we cannot say, yo. Everything we currently say using yo was always said with ye in the past, and accordingly, all church names in the Russian language never contain the sound yo. Therefore, even when people say, Yoros, it sounds jarring to me. Well, in general, the letter yo is actually unnecessary. It's not without reason that our ancestors did not use it in books because it's simply a variant of the pronunciation of the letter ye. Saying ye instead of yo has always been the norm in Russian. It has always been grammatically correct and had a somewhat solemn sound. But today, everything is changing. Nevertheless, personally, I don't like the letter yo, and we never use it in our books. However, now people think they are smarter than their ancestors and have decided to put these dots everywhere, even though it is a non-Russian letter. So, I saw this inscription, Yeros, and it amazed me. By the way, this post with the inscription was later cut down. After we published these photos in our books, a year or two later, we came to Yeros Fortress and didn't find that post. The name itself, of course, is known. There's a restaurant named after it. It is commonly used in the area, but that post with the inscription right in front of those towers is not there. I'm standing, taking a photo, and there's a ravine between me and those towers. It's a remnant of the ancient moat around Yeros. Well, of course, we were struck by the resemblance between this fortress, its location, moreover its name Yeros, and the neighboring mountain where the tomb of Jesus is located. There are many old icons, old depictions, where Christ is leaving Jerusalem, and these two huge towers, and the gate between them are depicted similarly. He is coming out of them, and nearby is the mountain where the cross is being prepared. And behind them in the background, there is a strait or a river. It's like a painting. Beykoz Mountain is to our left, where the Golgotha is. Here, we are on the mountain where Yeros is located, at the top point. Yeros itself is situated on the slope of the mountain. We are near the gate towers, and the fortress itself is located downhill, descending towards the Bosporus. These are two neighboring mountains. On one mountain is Yeros, on the neighboring mountain Golgotha is the tomb of Jesus. That's exactly how it's described in the Gospels.
Sure, the journey was not short, but it's not 30 kilometers.
One has to descend from one mountain and climb up another. It took several hours, just as it's described in the Gospels. There was no need to cross any straits. It's all on the same shore. The picture perfectly matched how it was supposed to happen according to the Gospels, and that's how it actually happened.
Let's look at more photos.
This is a view of the towers from a slightly different angle. There's the Bosporus in the distance. Another view of these towers. Again, the Bosporus is visible, and on the right, it flows into the Black Sea. It's an impressive structure. And the cemetery related to Yeros, to which the taxi driver brought us, is behind me, behind the bushes. We ended up here purely by chance. We approached these towers. The gates between them are currently closed, and they were closed back then too. But there was a passage on the right side where you could enter, and then it was blocked. Nowadays, archaeologists don't allow access there. They are digging something and don't let people in. But back in 2006 and for a few years after that, you could easily enter Yeros fortress. This is inside the fortress. We entered inside. We are looking at the same towers, but from the inside. They are not as rounded here. They are rounded on the outside. But on this side, there were some structures attached to them, remnants of buildings. In reality, everything under this green grass is all ruins. The city was destroyed, blown up, shattered, and only these towers remained. It was a destroyed city, from which only the most powerful, massive parts of the fortress structures remained. There were many walls there. This is the citadel, the upper town, the upper fortress. A huge area was enclosed, descending towards the Bosporus, and the remnants of these walls still exist. I'll show you the map shortly. This is the view from inside Yeros towards the Bosporus. The Black Sea is on the right, and the Bosporus flows towards Istanbul. We are looking towards Istanbul. Istanbul is in the distance. See the remains of another tower? These are not the gate towers. These are different ones. Here's one tower, the second tower. The slope towards the Bosporus, there's a small gate. The city descends along the slope. This is another photo from inside. We are inside this ancient city. See the uneven ground? It's evident that they are just stone fragments. Everything was shattered. There were some buildings there. Everything was destroyed, demolished. These are piles of stone debris. They were covered with soil. And now there's an uneven surface with pits where small trees grow.
This is a view from the remains of the wall.
Not all the walls were completely demolished. This wall overlooks the Bosporus. We see the entrance to the Black Sea. The Black Sea is nearby. It's the northern end of the Bosporus. Some distance still needs to be traveled along the Bosporus, but the Black Sea is already close. It's visible. This is a view from a ship. This is Yeros. See? That mountain where Yeros is located. At the foot of the mountain, there's a small town, and there's a pier where a ship docks, which sails from Istanbul. In the summer, it sails once a day. And on this occasion, we arrived on that ship. So, the first time we came by taxi when we first saw it. And this is another trip a few years later. And here we arrived on the ship. This is a view of the mountain where Yeros is located. On the left, there's an exit to the Black Sea. The Bosporus flows into the Black Sea. To the right, Mount Beykoz or Golgotha is not visible. It is zoomed in. Yeros is at the top. This is not the entire Yeros. The boundaries of Yeros reached the Bosporus. There, a wall ran along the Bosporus, the boundary of the city itself. But the city had a Kremlin, a citadel, and upper town. It was situated at a height. It had its own separate fortress structures. It was separated from the rest of the city. The royal stronghold was the Kremlin, and the city itself was big. Another time, we arrived by ship. We disembark at the pier, and here we immediately see a large painting depicting Yeros. Let me enlarge it for you. You see, here is the upper town with these two towers. And the city itself, where the rest of the people lived, was also large. Look, here are the walls from the upper town. They extend here, extend here. They even ascend to the neighboring Mount Beykoz, to Golgotha. In other words, the slope of Golgotha was also inhabited by the residents of Yeros. It was a huge city located on the shores of the Bosporus and directly adjacent to Mount Golgotha, which is now called Beykoz. We ascend again from the Bosporus side. Here are some towers. This is not the tower we saw from above. These towers are part of the walls that descend towards the Bosporus. Some of them have survived, overgrown. There are some remnants of the walls. There used to be a military base. They are no longer there. When these photos were taken, they were still there. It was a military settlement. It was not possible to go anywhere. We are ascending. This is a military barrack, as far as I remember. And these are the remains of the towers of the old Yeros. These are the walls. You see, they are made of stones, flat ancient bricks. This is a passage leading to the citadel, the Kremlin. There's a restaurant nearby. I think we passed through the restaurant to get there. Again, we entered inside. There were no archaeological excavations at that time, like today. Today, everything is closed. All the entrances are closed, and it's not possible to enter. How? There's a grill, and someone climbs over it. You can do it in running shoes if no one sees you. But back then, you could easily enter, whereas now only illegally. Currently, there are archaeological excavations inside. Interesting excavations. I looked through the gate several times. It was no longer possible to enter, but you could see that no one was doing anything there. I never saw a single archaeologist or any person there. However, now everything is closed. This is another view from the towers. There's a ditch here. Now it's a ravine, but it's the remains of the moat. The ravine passes by the towers, by the walls. These are remnants of the walls. Very impressive structures. In those times, it was truly something grandiose. Now it's overgrown, abandoned. This is also a view from the wall, one of Yeros' walls. The Bosporus is in the distance. This is a round tower. Another view from the walls of Yeros. The Bosporus is in the distance. These are remnants of the fortifications. You can appreciate how impressive they were. This is the entrance that leads from the citadel to the actual city. There used to be gates here, but now it's just an opening. By the way, this was done later, when archaeologists started working and fenced it off. This was taken later. You see, a sign is hung, indicating that entry is prohibited. In those photos, the same passage was shot, but it was open. And now it's fenced off. Someone with a gun. But there's no one inside. Some people are sneaking through. We saw them. Maybe not through this passage, but through another one where the mesh isn't as secure. They raised it a bit and got inside. This is again the Bosporus. We boarded the ship again. Here I captured both of these mountains.
On the left is the mountain where the fortress Yeros is located, which is in the distance.
And on the right is the mountain where the tomb of Yusha is located. So, these are two neighboring mountains. One mountain and another. The city itself descended from the citadel and partially ascended the mountain Golgotha. That's why Christ had to descend from this mountain and ascend to that one. Sure, it was not a short trip, but it wasn't a whole day's journey either.
In the Multimedia Museum of the New Chronology, in the hall that tells the story of the rise of the Second Empire, there are multimedia maps of the empire, a module that describes the ruling Komnenos dynasty. Augmented reality is used, allowing visitors to see what the fortress of Yeros looked like during the reign of Andronikos Christ and how the rulers of the empire controlled the movement of ships on the Bosporus. We will continue the conversation with Gleb Nosovsky about the Evangelical Jerusalem Yeros in a week. See you on the channel of the Multimedia Museum of the New Chronology.